So I would like to introduce the other presenters for this morning. Madeline Wirtz is going to provide a brief overview of some of the topics that admissions counselors cover when we talk to prospective students and their families. This is a very abbreviated version of a presentation that we give frequently. Usually it's much longer and more detailed, but we wanted to give you a sense this morning of some of the types of questions that you might be facing when you meet with prospective students in an interview setting or in a college fair environment. Maddie is a graduate of the class of 2007. She's an assistant commissioner, former life of mine, sorry. She's an assistant admissions director in the in our office, and she works very closely with me on Alumni Schools Committee matters. We'll also have a couple of PowerPoint presentations. Allison Keene, who is a graduate of the class of 2006 and the ASC chair for Manhattan, is going to speak about conducting alumni interviews and how to write a good interview report. And then Libby Pearson, who is a graduate of the class of 2005 and the ASC chair in Chicago, is going to talk a little bit about what we call our ambassadorial opportunities. So we're going to try to leave about 10 minutes for questions at the end. And again, if you want to talk more, please join us this afternoon. So I'm going to hand this over to Maddie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carol. I liked the title of Assistant Commissioner better. It sounds much more official. Like Carol said, my name is Maddie. I'm a graduate of the college. I graduated in 2007 and have been working for the office since then. And like Carol said, I assist her with the Alumni Schools Committee in addition to my admissions responsibilities. And for the past month and a half, I have been helping find alumni to staff college fairs around the country, 65 so far. And I spend about a half hour on the phone with alumni trying to prepare them for these college fairs, and it's been such a wonderful experience so far. It's been great getting to know the alumni who volunteer for us on a more personal level. Hearing their stories makes me even more excited about the work that they do in their professional lives, but also the support that they show for the university. So just to give you a little context about what I do in the office. So Carol asked me to give a very abbreviated version of what we talk about when we're meeting with prospective students and their families. And that's hard to do because these conversations can be, as long as an hour. And as you know, for those of you in the audience who interview prospective students, that these conversations can be very long as well. That in the university is dynamic. It's always changing. For instance, we just won 2 more Nobel Prizes in the past week, but there are the cornerstones that we always discuss when meeting with prospective students, and these aren't going to change. And so you as alumni and myself as a representative of the university and as an alumna of the university, I'm sure that we can agree that the following are the cornerstones. And while it is important to know the nuts and bolts of the application process, you can always look up that information on the website and remember the deadlines, remember the requirements for the application process. But Carol and I felt that this was much more meaningful to have a conversation about the following. We are a small liberal arts college within a large research institution, and this allows for research opportunities abound for undergraduate students. It also allows them to work with graduate students on a more advanced level. We have the liberal arts curriculum that it makes up the core curriculum, and this allows for the students to have their critical thinking skills that is beneficial for life. The programs of study that are the 49 majors, the 24 minors, the 45 study abroad programs, and the new Chicago Studies program that allows students to learn about the city that they're living and studying in. The advising system, we have 25 full-time advisors. These advisors don't do anything else besides advise the students. They don't teach, they don't research, so they are there for the full benefit of the student. We also have what we've always had, but it's becoming more highlighted, these pre-professional advisors. So for students who, as always, they could theoretically be a classics major, but, have the future goal of being, being in medical school. So they would be working with these pre-professional advisors. So they are called the Chicago Careers in Health Professions, Chicago Careers in Business, and Chicago Careers in Law. And, these advisors help the students prepare for med school, prepare for law school, and prepare for business school. And it's a really wonderful program that has been set up. And what's especially important to remember is that within the health professions, they're talking to students not just about being an MD. You know, they talk about all the health professions, which is really important. So research opportunities as well. We are a residential college. We have 11 dormitories, and then within these 11 dormitories, there's the house system. With the new dormitory that was just finished across the Midway, or we are across the Midway right now, but when I'm speaking to students, I'm not across the Midway. So that dorm was just completed a couple weeks ago, and it has 800 students in it. So what the primary focus was for the housing office was to think about how do you make this really, small community feel within this large environment of 800 students, and they think about this every time they're working on a new dormitory. So within the house system, you have the resident heads who are adults who are affiliated with the university. That could be professors, faculty, staff members, resident advisors who are upperclassmen, and they have the house lounges that have, the foosball tables, the pool tables, the TVs, the couches, study areas for students to relax in and to study in. We have 400 student organizations, which is really incredible when you look at a student body of 5,000 students. Students can find any type of interest within these student organizations, which again is really wonderful. 19 varsity athletic teams, 38 club sports, and 30 intramural sports. Intramural sports are obviously for everyone and anyone who is a student at the University of Chicago. They range from broomstick hockey to inner tube water polo to your traditional basketball and volleyball. And the 19 varsity athletic teams, they do, a spectacular job every single year. But many of our teams are going on to the NCAA championships. The arts are obviously a vibrant culture on campus and something that we're working on expanding. There's been a donation for a new arts building called the Logan Center, and that will be built on what we've now called South Campus, which is anything that's been south of the Midway. And that's projected to be finished by 2011. Also, students have the resources to do internships and to network with alumni through CAPS, which is the Career Advising Placement Services. And of course, the city as a resource itself is wonderful for the students to have. As you know, we're located 7 miles south of downtown, and we encourage students to get out into the city for social reasons and for professional reasons. So anyway, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me speak today. It's really important, the work that we do, and obviously you're here because you feel that way as well. And we really can't thank you enough for representing the University of Chicago. I will say, keep in mind when you're talking to prospective students that they are coming from, multitude of backgrounds. So you're looking at students at the college. Carol mentioned that we use alumni to staff college fairs and to do interviewing. So you're looking at students who are at the college fair phase where they might not know anything about the University of Chicago, and then you're working with students who are in the interview phase and they are a little bit savvier about the University of Chicago. So try to think about that when you're answering your questions, and they're asking you, well, what is the University of Chicago like? Well, that's a really broad question, and it's better to maybe answer that question by asking them a question to find out, academically what they're interested, extracurricularly what they're interested in, and always trying to engage them in the University of Chicago, and always trying to get them excited about the University of Chicago. So anything that we talked about today, if you forget it, that's okay. My policy, as long as you're there representing the University of Chicago, you're excited to be there, that's what's most important, and that's what will make the students excited about the University of Chicago. And I know that I'm going to hand the microphone off to Allison in just a minute to talk about the interviewing process, and she's going to go in a little bit more detail about that. And then Libby will talk about the college fair process. And like I said, all this information is on the ASC website. If you're not a volunteer, I definitely encourage you to sign up on the ASC website to become one. So thank you very much. And I'll be around at the roundtable session later as well.
As I think Carol said, I'm a 06 grad of the college, the ASC chair for Manhattan, and I did a lot of admissions office work as a student here. I've given more tours than I care to count. I think I could probably still give one in my sleep if you woke me up and asked me to. So that's sort of why I'm here. I'm curious to know, sort of before we get started, just maybe by a show of hands, how many folks are already involved with the ASC and giving interviews? So already involved giving interviews. And then are the rest of the folks pretty much new to ASC? Is that, yeah? Okay. No, not new. Okay. A mix. Okay, so I guess I should start just by saying that we have PowerPoints and all this fancy schmancy stuff, but this should be informal, conversational. If you have questions, just interrupt. I think that goes for Libby too. I'll speak for her. She loves interruptions. We should be here to give you the information that you guys want today. So, if we're not covering things that you're interested in and that you want more information about, just let us know. This is not supposed to be a lecture. And if it were, I'd do a bad job. So that's part of the reason why. So I guess, as you can see here, the role of I'm kind of afraid to walk this way. Let's see what happens. Nothing. Okay, so the role of an ASC volunteer is always basically twofold. So the two pieces are you're evaluating candidates for the admissions office in an interview, and you're also providing information to that student and providing information to the admissions office. So there's kind of two roles that we see. We call them the interviewer and the ambassador. Essentially, you're always an ambassador when you're serving the university, whether or not you're in an interview or you're going to a college fair. When you're speaking on behalf of the university, you are an ambassador. And this is a really important piece of the interview. Basically, for students, the interview is both informational and evaluative. And they really want to get a lot of information. And the reality is that you might be the only person that a student speaks to, like actually speaks to from the university. They might get lots of glossy catalogs, and they may or may not visit campus. If they do, they'll talk to other people. But they might not. So we take this role pretty seriously. The other thing to think about is, students are at different phases of the application process. So I don't know if any folks in here have students or kids that are around that age, but it's very different when they're kind of originally sort of evaluating schools versus when they've applied and when they're really thinking very seriously about attending the school, and they have different sorts of questions and concerns. Of course, also if they're parents, you know that parents have different sorts of questions and concerns. Things ranging from, will my child survive in the wilds of the South Side, to, more sort of mundane things like, will they get a job after graduating? So these are some things that you should think about. Do you want to? So I think we went through a lot of this. The most important thing for me on this page is really just, again, you may be the only person that the student sees face-to-face, to engage them in the kind of dialogue that we like to have here at the University of Chicago in the college. And for a lot of students, it is the quality of the conversation they have with an interviewer that really makes it a sort of special experience. I remember actually when I was interviewed in Manhattan myself, that's where I'm from, as a prospective student, I had a 2.5-hour interview, which is sort of a little bit long, as you'll see in a few minutes. It's a tad long. But it was really the kind of intellectual conversation that I had hoped I would get at the University of Chicago. And it was so exciting to me. It was unlike any other college interview I had in that sense. The person really wanted to talk to me about sort of interesting topics. We talked about politics. We talked about books. And, if you can have a conversation like that, you really can sort of translate what the environment is here on campus and in our coffee shops to, a coffee shop wherever you may be. So I think you can... So just to give you there's a lot of information on this page, but just to give you sort of an overview of what our schedule looks like over the course of the year, you can basically think about it almost like in the academic year here. So in the spring quarter, which is sort of when I think of the process starting, is when students start to really very seriously get interested in specific schools. They are visiting places in the spring and over the summer, starting their applications, requesting materials, learning about places. That's a really important time for the ASC from an ambassador perspective. We're often, attending college fairs in the late summer or kind of helping the admissions office reach out to folks. And that transitions into the fall when students are first starting to really work on their applications. We're attending a lot more college fairs. The admissions office is doing their travel for the year. They're going out really all around the country. And if you're curious about the admissions officer or commissioner for your region, definitely Maddie and Carol can help with that. I can't keep track of all the movement there. But basically, that's what's happening in the fall. People submit their early action applications, and that's a very busy time for the ASC because it's such a short turnaround. Basically, we get early action applications and interview requests and need to turn them around pretty quickly. So we have a bunch of interviews that are done then. Students receive decisions in December, right? Mid-December. which is also exciting, by the way, when you have students who are admitted. You can give them a ring and congratulate them, so that's something that we like to encourage. In the winter is really sort of, I think of it as a time of kind of like buckle down and everyone get to work. So the students sort of submit their applications. We get a slew of interview requests. So that's really the busiest time for the Alumni Schools Committee, is between, I would say, like January and March, when we have the highest volume of interview requests. We do our requests, submit them back to the office. They make their decisions for the students, which come out in April, and then, or I guess late March occasionally, and then the students have to decide. That's also a really exciting time for us because we're helping the students decide about a school, and that's certainly one of my favorite things to do, is to call an admitted student and say, hey, congratulations, you've been admitted, what kinds of questions can I answer for you? And often, I've had experiences where you kind of have a relationship with a student. You sort of stay in touch. You see them at the send-off party in the fall, which is really exciting. You kind of send them off to campus, and I've had one or two sort of stay in touch, actually, so that's been fun. So that's sort of the highlights here. I think, going through this in detail, you guys probably won't remember it, so. So kind of the nitty-gritty of how interviewing works. So basically, the steps from the ASC's perspective so you'll get an interview request, usually in an email from your local chair. So you'll have been communicating with your local chair. They'll send you an interview request. You basically, very soon after getting that request, we like to say within 3 days, you contact that student to set up an interview. They're usually really excited, and wow, someone from the university called me, so that's good. You can call or email. Calling is sometimes more efficient, just because you can shoot emails back and forth kind of forever. And it's also a nice gesture, especially in this day and age. Conduct the interview. Now, in most of the regions of the country, our interviews are done in person. We kind of really only allow phone interviews in situations where you must do a phone interview, like there's really no other choice. And I know in New York City, for example, where I work, if a student or if an alumni interviewer for some reason can't do it in person, I will just reassign that student, because it is really important to have sort of a face-to-face interaction. We do telephone interviews and Skype interviews in some situations, particularly international students. We're interviewing a ton of international students now over Skype, which is a new thing and has been really exciting. I know Libby can probably speak more to that. Libby actually chairs the Alumni Schools Committee in Chicago, and this is how we use many of our volunteers in Chicago. I don't know if anyone here is living in Chicago, but it's a great way to get involved with the ASC from here and talk to a lot of really cool international students sort of all over the world. So the next bit is write a report and submit it online. This is critically important. I sort of can't emphasize this enough. I've spoken a lot about sort of the ambassador role of a interviewer. The evaluative part of the interview is also important, and I see it kind of as a way for an interviewer to provide a little extra color to a student's application. So they'll talk more about this later, especially in the roundtable, I guess, but the admissions officers have a ton of sort of factual information. They have SAT scores, they have, GPAs, the classes the kids took, they've got these essays, they've got recommendations. They haven't necessarily had someone literally sit down and just talk to the student. That's your job, and if you don't submit an interview report, they'll never hear about it. So this is really important. It's really best to do it within the first couple of days after you've done the interview. I've done interviews myself, and it can be tough to remember what happened if you don't kind of sit down and just do it. So I think you'll thank yourself if you do that. And then, of course, be available for post-decision follow-ups. I think the important thing to point out here is, especially now as our application numbers have gone up a lot for the college, it is true that a fair number of the people you interview will not be admitted, and that's a bummer. It's a bummer as an interviewer, definitely. But the things we do are important either way. I like to think of it as, like, if I interview, Joe Schmo in Manhattan and he doesn't get in, but we had a good conversation and he had good feelings about the college, he will talk to other people. So it is really important. So I think we talked about this a little bit, in-person versus telephone versus Skype. Basically, most people will be doing in-person interviews. So that's mostly what you need to know. If you're in the Skype group, you're probably working with Libby, and she can give you the nitty-gritty on that. So again, this is basically the process for each of the things. I think a couple of things just to point out here. One is that, these interviews are, they're confidential, which is really important. We're not talking about them with folks outside of the admissions office. They are really not a test. I think this is an important thing. I don't know about you guys, but the only place that I interview in the rest of my life has been in sort of like my professional life and my job. And interviewing people who are not 17 is very, very different from interviewing people who are 17. So they're young, they're still figuring things out. You can have a great conversation, you can ask great questions, you can get great answers, you can get not such great answers because they're 17. So you kind of have to give kids a break, get the information that will be helpful to the admissions office, have a good conversation, but don't take it so seriously that the kid is, terrified and these people are too serious and what is this? Expected duration of the interview, 30 minutes, not 2.5 hours, but frequently I think they do go a little over 30 minutes and that's fine. Another important thing is it's really not your responsibility to travel to the student. So we do have students that are really all over the place. And like in the New York area, for example, I've got interviewers on the Upper West Side that were interviewing kids in Queens or Long Island even. And, it's the student's responsibility to travel to somewhere that's convenient for the interviewer. So in situations where that's a problem, you should talk to your ASC chair and they can help figure that out for you. Is there anything else? I think that's pretty much the big important points on this page. So you can go ahead. So this is just about sort of the interview itself. And again, I think there are just a couple of points that are worth pointing out on this page. I'm not going to go through the entire thing. One is the point about them being 17, which we already sort of talked about. Another is, so how can you engage the student? And I think what the students sort of think the interview is supposed to be about is often different from what we want the interview to be about. So they think that they're going to go in there and give this story about their resume or a litany of their grades and how great they are or something like that. And that's really not that interesting to us because we already have that information. And so the key, I think, with questions is to steer people away from that and to kind of get to the more interesting kind of conversation that has some depth. And some of the ways that I do that, for example, and maybe we can talk about this if we have some time at the end, if other people have favorite questions. But I ask kids about who their favorite teacher has been and why, sort of who has really engaged them in high school, what classes have really excited them, what are the subjects and why. Getting to the hows and the whys of the questions rather than the whats is usually kind of the best way to go. And often you'll find that you have something in common with the student. These kids are smart and they're well-read and they're sort of culturally savvy. It's rare that I find a student that I really have zilch to talk about with. So you can always fall back on that. Of course, you should, this is a funny one, do not allow parents to hover. So this is occasionally an issue. Sometimes parents will try to set up the interviews for the kids. Sometimes they will want to literally sit at the table with you while you have the interview. These are not things that we allow. So we're at a point, with these kids where they really should be having a conversation with you. And I think most of the time the parents understand that if you're kind of kind and telling them. But it is occasionally a problem. I think other things here, just again, the interviews are confidential. We've had, I think, a few isolated issues with this, so it's just important to keep in mind. And sometimes, people will have sort of an insane experience with an interview, and they want to share that. And that's probably when you should call Maddie and share it with her, the High Commissioner of Interesting Interviews. I think that's pretty much the big things from this page. Is that? So again, this is pretty much what we discussed before. Interviews are evaluative and informative. I like to make sure that I leave at least enough time, or at least as much time in interviews to answer their questions, talk about the university, talk about Chicago, talk about Hyde Park, as I do kind of, asking them questions and making them talk to me. I think a lot often comes out about their interest in the university and why, especially when you talk about those things as well. It is important when you are being an ambassador to be able to answer the questions they ask you. You won't have answers to everything. That's fine. But there are, a number of sort of quick and easy ones that you probably should be prepared for. And I think Libby will get a little bit to those in the sort of the ambassador section, but there are lots of resources available on the admissions office website, which is it still admissions.uchicago.edu? College admissions.uchicago.edu. Yeah, so great place just to read about things, or even something that I do is like just check out the university news page before doing an interview, just to know like how has the university been in the news, what Nobel Prizes have we won this week? Apparently we're already claiming Obama. He's on the website. They updated it the morning of the prize. So these are just kind of things you can talk about with students. I mentioned talking about subjects in school, and I keep wanting to say professors, teachers. Books are another great one. So students will have read a lot of books that you've read. You can ask them also about what their favorite books are and why, and those sorts of things are often good questions for the prospective UChicago student. Of course, you want to avoid, I think this was on a previous page, but sort of really culturally sensitive thing. Who did you vote for? That sort of thing, but you guys probably know that. I think we covered most of what's here. Sorry. She puts down the pen. I'm done. So again, this, you're basically the eyewitness for the admissions office. I think we'll hear a little bit more in the roundtable this afternoon about specifically how admissions officers use the interview. But again, it is an important piece. It is not necessarily going to be the deal breaker, but it's another piece of color for the application. And we do read applications at the university very holistically, so it's like every piece together. If you, of course, saw something that was a huge red flag about the student, you would communicate that in the report. But in general, we actually encourage, excuse me, I try to get my water here without hitting that mic. We do encourage volunteers actually not to give their recommendation about whether the student should be admitted or not. In general, you don't have all the information you need to be able to make that sort of recommendation. And there's kind of no point, it's a little bit of a waste of your time, because if you had all the application materials in front of you, yeah, sure, you'd probably be capable, but you don't. So it's kind of, give your impression of the conversation, be that eyewitness, and then let the admissions office do its work, obviously. So some of the things that are of interest to the admissions office, I like to think of this as, I guess this would depend on your undergraduate experience here, but sort of what are the kinds of conversations you have at the house table? What are the kinds of conversations that people have in the lounge at night where they want to stay up till 2 a.m.? Like, do you see this student being part of one of those conversations? What kind of roommate would this person be? What kind of kid would they be in a Hume class? Like how would they participate? Or what kind of papers would they write? Could they keep up with sort of like the intellectual rigor of this place? Would they enjoy it? Would they take advantage of it? These are the kinds of things that I generally think about. In general, I think the most important thing to think about is, what is this application not going to reveal about this student? What can I see here that is unlikely to have come through? One of the students that I interviewed a couple of years ago was just like incredibly poised and articulate and really, really thoughtful. And I thought, I don't know if that really would come through in an interview, and so that's something, in an application, and so that's something that I would definitely write in an interview report. Do you want to? Okay. So again, this is for the interview report. I like to think of it sort of as a little story. You don't want to make it a transcript of your conversation. So I've definitely seen some that are, first the student walked in and I noticed what she was wearing and this is what it was, and she ordered a coffee and I like tea. So, not incredibly helpful, obviously. You do want to set the scene, but you can also take that, I think, a little too far. Again, even if the student does get into a lengthy conversation about their SAT scores, like really not terribly important to relate in the interview report. More, what was your conversation? What did you talk about? What did you pick up about the student? I think it's more important, and this is what I tell my volunteers, to submit a report than to worry about the content of the report and kind of make it perfect and write something up and send it in. It's more valuable to the admissions office to have something than to have, something that's imperfect versus like nothing because you wanted it to be perfect. So, you wanna? This is basically how you submit your report. We won't go into this in detail, but suffice to say it's easy, and if you have trouble, like, we're always here to help. One of the roles, I think, of the admissions office and also of the ASC chairs is to make this easy for volunteers. We don't want you to be doing vast quantities of sort of like logistics. We want you to be out interviewing students. So we try to be helpful, and I think Carol and Maddie and Chris, who's the intern in the ASC office, are great at that. So again, I think we talked about this a few minutes ago. It is easier for you to write the report, and it's a better report the sooner you write it. It's also easier for an ASC chair to not chase you around looking for your report. That's really all I have to say about that. Again, this is Skype stuff. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's basically what they do in Chicago. Again, if you have questions, you can always ask us or go to the website. I think Maddie and Carol are always kind of have their doors open and their telephone lines open to answer questions. And if you're thinking about interviewing for the ASC, you're welcome to talk to some of us up here. I know myself, Libby, Coco's been doing it for many years. Lee, Corin can definitely help and answer some of those questions and let you know sort of what kind of time commitment is it, what can I expect, how many interviews, that sort of thing. All right. So next up we have Libby. She's going to speak about sort of the ambassador role of interviewing.
So I'm going to talk about our ambassador roles, and you're always an ambassador. While you're out doing interviewing and college fairs and things like that, you're definitely an ambassador. But while you're at the grocery store, you don't want to, I know you guys aren't like crazy people, but you don't want to be a crazy person in front of an applicant and then interview them and they're like, you're that crazy lady from the grocery store. So just, be aware that any moment could be a time to talk about the University of Chicago. It just could happen. So I guess I'm introducing the ways in which ASC volunteers serve as ambassadors for the college. It's mostly in terms of college fairs, though Suzanne over here does a book club or book awards for Tampa Bay, and she and I were talking about that this morning. So that's something that maybe we could get more involved in as the Alumni Schools Committee. And you'll be asked to maybe do panels near your hometown, and then also just telling people about the university during interviews, telling parents, winning hearts and minds. That's sort of the goal of being an ambassador. One thing about doing college fairs, which I do a lot of, is that you may have done interviews, you may sort of have certain expectations of what a student who's already applied and requested an interview might know about the university, but with college fairs you can really get anything. So we made a little continuum, the not a clue to Chicago as first choice. And you can see, when you go out to a high school, you can sort of place that high school as a whole on one of, somewhere in this continuum. Like, it may be a school where we haven't recruited that much. It may be a school, I'm thinking in particular about Queen of Peace High School in Burbank, Illinois, which is right next to a bunch of schools that send us a lot of applicants, but no one from there has applied to the university for a while, maybe. So that was like the not a clue high school. And there's things that you need to do and ways that you need to sort of capture the university to bring in everybody from the spectrum into being interested in the university. But at Queen of Peace, we had this one family where the oldest daughter had gone to University of Chicago, gotten married in Bond Chapel, the whole shebang. The family loved us. They were really trying to encourage the younger daughter to apply. So you can just get everything and you need to be ready for it. Next slide. So, college fairs, they're the best thing ever. Who goes to college fairs? I find that I go to a lot of college fairs. How many of you live in the Chicago area? Okay, I'm going to be sending all you to college fairs now. It's, of alumni, it's us, and we're meeting with people who are, like it says, younger and less savvy. So it could be the first time that they've ever even thought about college. Their parents could have dragged them there. You don't know, but you have to try to engage everybody who walks by the table. And often, we're either near the U's, like the other universities of, or the C's, so you might be next to Carleton College. It's usually in alphabetical order, so you're not next to a university usually that is like you. Sometimes we're near Columbia. One time at Queen of Peace High School, we were next to UIC, which was really bad because everybody, not only do people think that we are UIC, they had like this giant crowd, and then on the other half of the table was us, and we were just trying to convince people that no, they hadn't visited us, we're not UIC. It was bad news. But, they're just walking along all the U's or the C's, and, they come upon University of Chicago. They may have never heard of us, even very close to us. And then, again, some know a lot, and we're looking for us all night. The students do get a sheet that says every university that's there, their parents maybe have highlighted and circled things, and they're like, you have to go to these. So they may have done that. And then also, it's really great when you meet alumni parents because they can come in and, reminisce about the university with you. I went to law school, I got my MBA there. Did you hear we were just ranked #1 for business school again? It's great. And they'll get excited, and, people will listen in on the conversation and maybe get them excited. So that can be really fun to meet them. So the questions you get, obviously, are going to be less savvy than the ones you would get in an interview. It's really difficult to answer the question, tell me about the University of Chicago. And Maddie made a great point in saying maybe you should then ask the student a question, what are you interested in? What are you looking for in a college? They may say nursing, and the conversation may be over right then. Or they may say, I want a research university. That's less common, but if it happens, it's really great. A lot of the time we hear, what class rank or GPA do you require? And I guess you should know that we don't have any cutoffs in the admissions process. And we also we read holistically. And so we don't really, say A's and B's. Some students don't have A's and B's and they get in. You never know. We just say, well, we like it when students take advanced classes and when they're very thoughtful and intellectually curious, and we really look at the essays. So you can say those kinds of things. So when you're at the college fair, we give out these things, and we call them, in the office, we call them the travel piece. I don't know what people outside the office call them. Yeah, on the flash drive you'll have this, but this is like the thing that they pick up. Everybody on their tables has a thing they pick up, and then they have all these other things that say table copy, like the course catalog. We're not giving that out. But in this, they have like an SAT and ACT range, and that is deadly because our SAT and ACT ranges are really high, and so people will look at that and they'll say, I don't have that, and then they'll maybe walk away. This is not the cutoff or the guideline. It's just what our students happen to have. And the range for ACT is 29 to 34. A quarter of our students don't have a 29. And I can tell you, having worked in the admissions office, that the tail is pretty long. So you can sort of reassure people that that's not really what we're looking at. That's the question they may have been told to ask, because a lot of the schools they may be looking at do have cutoffs, and they do have these, average scores that they'll gladly tell everybody because that is how they're making decisions. But for us, we really want to emphasize, the question that is really at hand is how do we make decisions, what are we looking for? And it's not really the test scores so much. Pre-med, that comes from all my fairs on the south side recently. I always bring a pharmacist with me to fairs because every student on the south side, I think, wants to be a pharmacist. Or they want to be pre-med. So she was pre-med, she was a history major, and then now she's in her final year of pharmacy school. It's a knockout. They love her. So But, I mean, you're going to bring your interesting experiences as a professional. I'm now in public policy school, and I was an admissions counselor. Not a lot of people who are like, how can I become an admissions counselor? Or, you know, how can I be a public servant? But you'll bring sort of your own experiences and the experiences of your roommates and your, you know, fraternity brothers and sorority sisters and everybody you know, and you'll say, this person did this, and then they became a really successful blank. And you'll be able to draw on that for people to sort of talk about what professionally you can do after University of Chicago. Is it safe? I actually don't really get that often. But I did get during a panel, is it really where fun comes to die? Everybody's going to have a different answer to this. You can say it's a joke. You can say yes. You can say, we don't really want you to say yes. But you can just talk about, like, you know, it's a college, you know, it's going to be fun, you're going to have fun, it's going to be great. Yeah, tell the parents that it is where fun comes to die, but the students, you know, tell them that you had sort of a normal life. And then there's also people who are really looking for a very specific pre-professional thing. Some of these things we can accommodate, like journalism. I've had a lot of journalists tell me that majoring in journalism is like a death sentence for your journalism career. You should major in things that you want to become an expert on and then sort of get these internships. But something like engineering, you have to go to an accredited engineering school. I do know students who've gone on to masters in engineering from here. Architecture, you have to go to an accredited architecture school. Nursing, we're not really going to be able to accommodate that. Pharmacy, we can. So it depends. I don't think everybody should become experts on what are the qualifications to become a professional in anything, but it's something where you can say, well, I have a friend who did this, and it was okay. Financial aid, people ask what the tuition is. I always say it's really high, and then I talk about financial aid. So definitely encourage students to apply for need-based financial aid. Most of our students are on financial aid. That's also something that's really, really reassuring that not everybody at the university is paying the sticker price. In fact, the minority of students are paying the sticker price, and that financial aid is very accessible for every kind of family. And it's good to sort of think about, like, what would you say to these things before you walk in? Because you need to give a quick answer. There's tons of people around. They may want to only spend a few minutes at each table, and you need to, you'll come up with some kind of snappy answer, anecdotes that you tell over and over, and that's sort of good to have in your arsenal when you go into a college fair. Okay. Is this, okay. So, yeah, we list our majors in this thing, which is helpful. You know, people will just scan along it and they'll say, oh, you have 5 majors that I'm interested in, or you don't have engineering. Bye. And we also, I think, do we list our pre-professional stuff? No, but Maddie talked about it. You know, Chicago Careers in Business, people love to hear about that. The Health Professions Advising Office, they're just really, really good at supporting pre-health students. Talk about the student organizations, campus community. You really don't find that in the college fair setting you get to talk about the core that much. A lot of times I'll sort of talk about the core in response to a student who says, I'm undecided, and I'll say, well, that's great because we make you take everything, so you'll definitely be decided after that. Or, you know, students who have really divergent interests like math and classics or something like that, I'll say, great, you know, we have this really great curriculum that serves people like you. But the core may be something that, like, is too early for a college fair. Yeah?
Excuse me, we do have some engineering courses now, but not a complete engineering program.
That's true. We do. I mentioned that to...
And then there's also the computer science.
Right. Yeah. So if they're interested in computer engineering, I think we can definitely talk about that. That's not usually what people want to do, though. And we do have professors who are doing engineering stuff, and they're doing engineering research, and that may be something that students can do in a few years, but it's not an accredited engineering course. So, you know, I have to be clear about that. And usually when I say that about the engineering research, they aren't really interested. But maybe someone will be interested. I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, if you're confused, if you go to a college fair and you realize you have, like, a huge gap in your knowledge about how we prepare students for journalism, the websites of the university are definitely your best resource. Just going to the main university website, read the Maroon, go to the ASC website, see what we have to say about it. And then Maddie usually contacts people before the college fair to see if you have any questions, so you can talk to someone, just come up with questions, have a conversation. And then going to the university's website just in general to see the news of the day is really helpful. Challenges, so crowd management, you're at a table which may be like this wide, and you have all this stuff. Usually what I do, and everyone has a different way of doing it, we ask students to fill out what we call in the office P cards, which is short for postcards, I guess. But we ask them to fill it out, and so we have, we'll give you these P cards and pens and everything else you need to put out, and the students will fill them out, and they can either give them back to you at that time, and then you'll send them to the admissions office later along when you send back all your stuff, or they can actually just drop it in the mail, and it's free of postage. But, getting people, I put them on the corners of the table so that people can sort of, do that, and then someone else can come in down the center and ask questions. And then we also have these that we give out, and so I'll put them right next to the P cards. Ruth puts the travel pieces right in front of her so that everyone's forced to have a conversation with her. So, because otherwise people really would just, take it and go. I've seen, fathers literally running through college fairs, taking things off tables. And then, they take a table copy thing, and, later they come and give it back. So, crowd management, your own style, you could have a huge crowd, you could have almost no one, and you're, begging people to come to your table. It all depends on the school, it depends on the kids. But it is a good idea to keep it a little bit short, encourage them at the end of the conversation to come for a visit, if they're in Chicago, to reach out to their admissions counselor if they're not in Chicago, to sort of get the ball rolling, have a further conversation, because a college fair is a kind of crazy time to have a big conversation. Parents can really, sometimes try to drive the conversation. Try to look at the student and talk to the student and give things to the student when they're in front of you, unless the student is literally hiding behind the parent or not there. That happens too. The parent said, my student sent me to do this. They're at home studying, doing what's actually important, and I'm out here doing colleges for them. So that's fine. You'll be given a chair. Try to make sure there's enough chairs for everybody behind the table. But you do get tired at some point. These are 2-hour-long, usually, affairs. And so sit down when no one's coming. It's okay. If you don't know the answer, we do give you a stack of business cards for the regional counselor for that area, and you can just hand those out and say, get in touch with this person. But be excited. Try to stay peppy. They'll give you water. Drink the water. Stay hydrated. Stay on your feet. So. We also asked people in Chicago to sometimes come and volunteer for our on-campus programs and also for Saturday mornings. I know some of you have volunteered for some Saturday mornings. Those are for interviews, but we wanted to sort of talk a little bit about schmingling. It's a mixture between schmoozing and mingling. It's just sort of to make families who have come to campus and maybe a little bit nervous about the whole college thing, to just give them your name, tell them that you're happy to see them, you're happy they're there, if you can answer any questions, if you just want to talk about the traffic, it doesn't really matter what you talk about. It's just good to sort of, to be there for them, to not just have them sit waiting for the tour, drinking their coffee. That's it? Oh my goodness. Okay, so now we're going to go to questions and answers. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, because we started a little bit late. Anyone have questions? Yeah.
I had a question about the course catalogs. I know when my daughter, that's what sold her on the University of Chicago. She went to college fair, saw the course catalog, and that did it. And so how conversant, if you're doing an interview in your home, for example, can we have one of those, or is it accessible online? How familiar should we be with what the current content is of what's available?
It's really long, but I did find when I was an admissions counselor that with reading it really helped me understand a lot of the programs I wasn't familiar with. So if you have time, I would definitely suggest reading at least the programs you're not familiar with. It is available online. It's at collegecatalog.UChicago.edu. And it's on our website, linked from the ASC website. You will have a copy of it at a college fair, so that's maybe a good time to flip through it. But during interviews, I think we don't really send them out to all the interviewers, unfortunately. Yeah?
I've done CATS interviews before, but I've done new to admissions or using them maybe different animals. Are there any training or workshops available for reading?
This is it.
This is it.
There's also a training manual that you can access on the ASC's website that kind of goes into all of these topics.
The other thing that's a little bit different about ASC is that it's done by chaired regions. So you will have a chair for your region whose job it is to make sure that you are ready to do that interview. So they're always a resource for you and help you kind of get up to speed.
I just have one quickie. How much influence in the whole process does the ASC interview have in the admissions decision?
It has, can you hear this? It's part of the holistic process, so it is considered along with everything else that the admissions office looks at as part of the student's file. So it's being considered along with grades, test scores, recommendations, what the counselor has to say, what they write. It's one piece of the whole puzzle. And come back this afternoon because we'll specifically talk about that. And one more question that we really do have to go. Yes.
I interview people that order books and everything we're allowed to talk with me, so that if they ask something that I don't know, or I think, oh, this is really neat, maybe that you prefer, or not, let's go look at it. We started searching the website together, and it was very useful because we're doing this now on campus. That's all yesterday.
That's a great idea. I'm sorry, we do have to cut now, but we will be back here in the afternoon. Please join us for the roundtable, and we can go into your questions in more detail. Thank you so much.